Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the first episode of season 3 of the Afghan Eye Podcast. I'm your host, Sangar Paykhar, and with me, I have none other than
Ahmed-Waleed Kakar wa alaikum assalam.
we have started the third season of the Afghan Eye Podcast. In this season, we will be focusing more broadly about the region, so Central Asia, South Asia, Middle East. And in order to cover all these regions and their relations with Afghanistan, we are trying to position our podcast as embodiment of the concept heart of Asia, because Afghanistan is a unique position in Asia. We are dead center between Central and South Asia, Middle East, and East Asia. And this unique position provides us with the opportunity to discuss geopolitics, shifting dynamics in global politics, and with the current situation in Afghanistan, where there is some level of stability and there is some level of development going on, but at the same time, there are tensions. There are currently mass protests in Pakistan and in Iran, and all these regional dynamics, they have some interplay with Afghanistan. So this is why in this third season of the Afghan Eye podcast, we will try to discuss obviously Afghanistan, but also the interplay of Afghan affairs with the wider region. What would you say, Kakar Saib?
Well, once again, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. And yes, there is a lot going on. And as of this moment, alhamdulillah ta'ala, Afghanistan is an anchor of stability in an increasingly turbulent region, which, to be quite honest with you, were words that I never thought I would say. But we are where we are, and it's lovely to be starting this new season. And might I add that we are picking up right where we left off.
With our favorite neighbor, Pakistan. Because as we wrapped up the last season of the Afghan Eye podcast and discussed matters related to Afghanistan and Pakistan, the latest news on Afghanistan and Pakistan is that official US documents have been published where it is stated in black and white that the government of Pakistan has sought a lobbying firm, a law firm in United States, and have actively asked them to lobby on their behalf on a matter that is related to Afghanistan. And in United States, they have a law where any entity that lobbies on behalf of a foreign nation, they have to declare that, and this is officially documented. And this particular law is called FARA or FARA. And under this law, all the agreements that are made needs to be published, and it needs to be available for public, for everyone to verify what these lobbying firms actually are doing and how they are lobbying on behalf of a foreign entity. And in this particular case, the lobbying firm that was acting on behalf of Pakistan is Squire Patton Boggs. It's a law firm and policy and lobbying firm. They are based in, where was it? I think it's based in Washington, D.C. And basically, this organization does a lot of corporate litigation and international reach. And this organization has sent a letter to the State Department at the United States. Maybe I should put that on screen for our viewers to see. So a email has been sent by Paul Jones from Squire Patton Boggs. And Paul Jones is a retired US ambassador. And this is usually how it works in the United States. When you retire as an ambassador, as a cabinet member, as a secretary in government, or any other high ranking position, Then you continue your career working as a lobbyist, where you basically represent rich, powerful entities or foreign governments. And here we see that Paul Johnson has sent an email to Elizabeth Horst of US State Department on 14th of May 2023. Now, Kakar Saib, do you remember what was going on in May 2020? I mean 2025.
Well, May 2025, off the top of my head, I had traveled to Istanbul for a
And
for a conference,
yes,
um, which I won't talk about any further. But it, May 2025 is nothing directly springs to mind.
how about a small war between India and Pakistan?
Of course, of
It
course.
was right during that time when India and Pakistan were involved in an armed conflict with one another. When this email was sent, it is now being made public. However, the email is from 14th of May 2024. Now,
25.
uh, 25, I'm sorry. We will get into the details of the email later, but first of all, for some context, Kakar Saib, so as we have discussed numerous times on Afghan Eye with our guests, there are efforts by the Pakistani authorities, the current military junta, to start a war with Afghanistan. These claims have been made here on the Afghan Eye by numerous guests. We've discussed this at length in season 2, but now we have actually like evidence that supports those claims. Obviously, even previous guests who discussed this matter, they had their fair share of evidence for this claim, but now it is verified from a source, a very unlikely source, the government of United States.
What is notable about this revelation or this disclosure is the fact that it is a smoking gun. It is right from the horse's mouth, and it comes off the back of months and years of reporting alleging that this was the case. But now we have evidence that we can more or less deem to be irrefutable. I will correct you on one point, which is that you said foreign lobbying group in the United States has to be declared, and almost like what we have in the UK is a freedom of information. Information about it is made public. That is true, except for one country. I'm not going to mention the country's name. It's currently embroiled in a genocide, and is the US's favorite settler colony, but no names.
Maybe you can shed some light on the evidence or reporting that was already made about efforts by the Pakistanis to drag United States into another war in Afghanistan.
Sure. I mean, there have been quite a few. I think first and foremost, it's important to bear in mind the context, bill leading up to the 14th of May 2025, which is when this letter was written to the US State Department. So in April 2022, Imran Khan was ousted or removed in a vote of no confidence that was widely alleged to have been orchestrated by the US. I believe it was in April 2022 as well that the Pakistani military first bombarded Afghanistan. It was the month of Ramadan. I remember we covered it then. And since then, there's been a trajectory of escalating military action conducted unilaterally by Pakistan against alleged TTP hideouts in Afghanistan. That has happened over the years, repeatedly, consistently. And this year, especially in October, we saw a brief conflict emerge in which Afghan retaliation on this occasion was particularly harsh, and there was a couple of days of back and forth. That is the overall context. The reporting that we've seen during this period, I think the most prominent was first reported on the 7th of February 2025 by Dropsite News. And in this article, written by four authors, so Siddhartha Roy, Murtaza Hussain, Kunwar Shahid, and Ryan Grimm. Title is Pakistan's military hopes to drag Trump back into war in Afghanistan. And specifically over here, it's highlighting Islamic State or Daesh linked groups. Now, what's important here is for our purposes, and we discussed this in our previous episode, the last episode of season 2, which is that the TTP, or at least senior commanders in the TTP, like Hafiz Gul Bahadur, have disavowed mass takfir with regard to all of Pakistan's military institutions. Therefore, you can't really put them in the same bracket, but you can't really call them Khawarij. Any application of the term Khawarij is politically motivated, and they're definitely not similar to Daesh. But over here, it's important because it says Islamic State linked groups in Afghanistan. And this is a dramatic move that is hoped would draw the US back into the region as an ally and a counterterrorism partner. Why is that important? Why is it important that the US is back as an ally and a counterterrorism partner? Well, I'm going to quote one of our previous guests, who I'm sure we'll get back to in a couple of moments, Adil Raja, who said, they create terrorism so they can sell you counterterrorism. The article attributes the idea, or posits this to be the brainchild of Asim Munir, who was back then still the Pakistani chief of army staff. And it says, as a prerequisite to any offensive inside Afghanistan, Munir believes the army must first settle its domestic political conflict with the PTI, that is Imran Khan's party. Without buy-in from Pakistan's political parties, the military risks fighting on two fronts, a messy conflict abroad and a legitimacy crisis at home. And this is something that we've highlighted as well, even in our previous episode, Sangar, which is saying that Pakistan's domestic insurgencies are not as much foreign rooted and cannot as easily be externalized as they are stemming from deep legitimacy crises at home. And in the instance of the TTP, a specifically religious legitimacy crisis. Now, the attempt to embroil the US into Afghanistan, and as a result, Pakistan, will only exacerbate that crisis. That is my 2 cents. But in any case, I digress, and I'll go back to this article. The region is home to a number of competing militant groups, including the Pakistani Taliban and the local branch of the Islamic State, known as ISIS-K. Following the collapse of the US-backed government in Afghanistan, the Afghan Taliban, formerly an insurgency backed by Pakistan, now controls the government in Kabul. The Pakistani military has tried to maintain a delicate balance by fighting the TTP, which threatens its own rule, whilst indulging the Afghan Taliban, despite growing tensions over counterterrorism and border security. And right in the final section, it says Pakistan's military now faces multiple simultaneously challenges: managing relations with an unstable neighbor, eradicating militant networks within their own borders, and navigating the political complexities of PTI-dominated regions. Needless to say, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and the former tribal areas are PTI strongholds. Now, this is the first, I would say, major report that we saw alleging that Asim Munir, or the junta led by him, was seeking to perhaps embroil the US and Afghanistan. And once again, it's very important to understand why this is the case. Pakistan is a country beset or beleaguered by numerous crises, economic, political, and the entrance or the re-entrance of the US back into Afghanistan would bring something of a panacea for Pakistan's military. It would allow Pakistan to posit itself as a logistical supply route, to benefit from some of the contracts that come naturally with an enlarged US presence, and to benefit from the political legitimacy that once again comes from being a major non-NATO US ally. And this report was more or less repeated on the Afghan Eye podcast when, Sangar, you hosted someone who I would term a friend of the show, Adil Raja.
The problem over there is that the military structure works in a chain of command. at the top of the food chain or the top of the command is Field Marshal Asim Munir, who has allegedly promised President Trump that he's going to get him the Bagram Air Base through a regime change in Afghanistan. These were the reports already. So even if the ISI, headed by firstly headed by is the Director General of the Special Operation Division, Major General Shahab Aslam, and later by the Director General ISI, who we call the DGI, Lieutenant General Asim Malik himself, even if they wanted to, and they did want to, sort out things with Afghanistan, because Afghanistan is a very important country for Pakistan, considered the strategic depth once they're facing India. So they wanted to sort out the things with Afghanistan, but the promise made by Field Marshal at that time, that was the main hurdle in making peace with Afghanistan. Firstly, secondly, because but still they were unable to, even the Asim Munir, there's limit to the wishes. If wishes could be, if his wishes could be met, I mean, by now we would have seen a regime change in Afghanistan, because the Afghan opposition was being invited in Islamabad by the ISI, hosted by in Islamabad by the ISI, and they held a conference for aimed at a regime change in Afghanistan, but it couldn't fly. Why? Because Afghanistan, Afghanistan, very, very, I would say, wisely and very diplomatically and very pragmatically engaged the UAE, Qatar, and Saudi Arab.
So once again, over there, and I believe this podcast was about a month ago.
Yeah.
So initially, the report is by Dropsite News is published in February. This letter that we will go through together was written in May, and just about a month and a half ago, so we're looking about November, December, Adil Raja made the following claims with regard to Asim Munir having not just promised a regime change in Afghanistan, but also promising President Trump the return of the Bagram airbase, which he's mentioned numerous times that he'd like to get back as something that he could offer as part of a quid pro quo in terms of improved relations with the United States. And what he's referred to over there with regard to the Kabul bringing in the UAE and Qatar and Saudi Arabia is that following the breakdown of these negotiations that well, I wouldn't say they were a breakdown, but the negotiations that brought into effect the ceasefire between Afghanistan and Pakistan in late October was that, and this, I guess you could say, has a parallel to what's going on in Iran at the moment. The Gulf monarchies, even insofar as they're considered to be proxies or satellites of the American empire, at least in recent times, we're seeing quite a large divergence of interests where they want to maintain, or at least some of them want to maintain, the status quo within the broader region. They don't want to have any more war or religiously inspired insurgencies. They don't want territorial integrity to be harmed. So what Adil Raja is referring to there is how it was something of a strategic masterstroke that they were brought into the room as stakeholders and mediators, and essentially indirectly curtailed Pakistan's goal or aim to re-embroil the US in Afghanistan. So this was, I forgot the date, Sangar, but I believe I'd say November 2025.
Adil Raja, no,
Yeah,
this was 3 weeks ago.
3 weeks ago.
It
Damn,
was somewhere in mid-December.
mid-December. And now I think we can go on to, sorry, yeah, خبر دي كمان.
Yes. So now it's very important to note that Adil Raja was talking about how Pakistan sees Afghanistan as a strategic depth, and that they were involved in a conflict with India in May 2025. And while they were in a conflict with India, that's when this particular email was sent out. And I'm going to read out. So the email from the lobbying firm sent by Paul Jones on 14th of May 2025 states that, hi Elizabeth, I hope you're well. As you know, Squire Patent Box is registered agent of the government of Pakistan under FARA. So this means that this email in the header, it announces we are sending you an email as an agent of the of the government of Pakistan.
Full disclosure.
Yes. So what they say is, we'd very much appreciate your feedback on the attached one-page outline of ways forward in the US-Pakistan relationship. So basically, they have a proposal and that they have sent out, and they want feedback on it. And there are a couple of important things mentioned here, but the most significant aspect of this letter is where they mention the fact that they have plans and ideas for Afghanistan. So what they say is Pakistan is prepared to double down on its commitment to counterterrorism cooperation with the United States. Pakistan demonstrated its capability and commitment to counterterrorism by arresting and expelling to the US the Abbey Gate ISIS bomber who killed 13 American soldiers. Now, bear in mind, this is sent on the 14th of May, and back then there was a person allegedly claimed to be the mastermind for the Abbey Gate shooting in 2021. Later, sources in Afghanistan, but also sources in the United States confirmed that no, the person the Pakistanis handed over to the US as the mastermind was actually not the mastermind, but maybe a minor figure involved in the conspiracy. But the mastermind was actually killed in Afghanistan by the Taliban earlier, I think at least 2 years ago. I think it was in 2023. So here in this section of the letter, Pakistan is making a claim that was already debunked, because there were reports and it was confirmed that the mastermind of Abbey Gate was someone who was already killed. Moving on, the letter states, President Trump thanked Pakistan for this assistance in his speech to joint session of Congress in March 2025. Yes, Donald Trump have made many claims, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's actually the truth. Further, they write in the letter, Pakistan is prepared to do more with the US against ISIS and assist in retrieving US military weapons and equipment left behind in Afghanistan, which are now being used to destabilize Pakistan. So Trump has repeatedly stated that Joe Biden, during his administration, he made a mess by leaving around $7 billion worth of military equipment to the Taliban. And he has repeatedly stated that he wants those weapons back. Now, what is important to note that in this proposal, they are referring to that repeated claim by Donald Trump and saying that they will go and retrieve it. And the way it's written here, it sounds like it's in a pile somewhere in a shed next to the madrasa where Sheikh Abatullah Akhundzada teaches. It's all in a pile, and they just can go and walk in Afghanistan, pick them up, and then load them in Karachi on a boat and send them to the United States. So, and then they say that those weapons are being used to destabilize Pakistan. So here is an interesting question for you. If Pakistan is capable of going into Afghanistan, collecting all those weapons, and then handing them over to the United States, how come they are not capable of preventing them to destabilize Pakistan?
Well, questions. You're asking the wrong question. You're asking the wrong question, and the real question is why is that pile there next to the madrasa in Kandahar where Sheikh Hibatullah Khunzada teaches hadith? But I think this is ultimately really, really important, and it's not important insofar as it's groundbreaking or something new, because like we've established thus far, we've had these reports already. But this is really a smoking gun, and I appreciate as well. Sort of, there's a section on trade and investment, on financial modernization. For our purposes, as sort of the heart of Asia's perspective on the region, those are not Pakistan's financial modernization and financial tech is not particularly our area of expertise or interest. But I'm just going to pick up where you left off, Sangar. And it says Pakistan seeks more US collaboration against the Pakistani Taliban, whose terrorist attacks aim to establish a Taliban regime in Pakistan, and which the 2025 US DNI annual threat assessment cited as a potential threat to the US. And then now there's a fourth section, and this is also related to Afghanistan, and Afghanistan is mentioned specifically, which is geopolitical. And I guess we could say this is something of a summary. Pakistan seeks a bilateral US relationship that stands on its own merits, not dependent on US relations with Pakistan's neighbors. Pakistan's long-standing relationship with China is based on geographic location and does not inhibit Pakistan's offering the US concrete economic and counterterrorism opportunities. Pakistan also believes that the US-India relationship should in no way inhibit stronger US-Pakistan ties. The US and Pakistan share important counterterrorism concerns regarding Afghanistan. Pakistan has taken resolute actions against Iranian support for terrorist separatists in Pakistan and would welcome further coordination with the US. So there's quite a lot going on here, Sangar. There is quite a lot going on here. So number one is the fact that Pakistan is not seeking to confine or address its insurgencies within its own territory. And it's not only externalizing them to Afghanistan, it's seeking to globalize them by dragging in the US, which is important because in the geopolitical section, Pakistan, the letter emphasizes that Pakistan has a long-standing relationship with China based on geographic location. And this is, one may ask, why Pakistan seeks to balance the US and China, or what is it that the US brings that China does not bring to the table? Well, one thing that the US brings, if and where the circumstances are opportune, is boots on the ground. And boots on the ground in Afghanistan cannot be achieved without going through Pakistan. And that means supply chains, that means smuggling, that means contracts, that means logistics, that means all sorts of things. And the problematization of Afghanistan is a cow that, quite frankly, you cannot afford to avoid milking. In the same way that Pakistan, and we spoke, there's been a lot of discussion with regard to Afghan refugees. And unfortunately, I feel like a lot of the times when we talk about how Pakistan exploited Afghan refugees, a lot of Pakistanis, I'd say rightly, are upset because a lot of them, and I know this personally as well, a lot of them will say, we gave our land, tribal lands to Afghans. We really opened our hearts and our homes up for them. How did we exploit them? And when we say Pakistan exploited Afghan refugees, we're not talking about sort of the actual refuge and asylum that was given by average Pakistanis, but more so the fact that the military junta or governments of the previous decades have used the aid intended for Afghan refugees to line their own pockets or to divert those toward the military budget. But I digress. Over here, there's one thing that's very important, Sangar. Pakistan believes that the US-India relationship should in no way inhibit stronger US-Pakistan ties. So there are 2 points here. This is, as you correctly pointed out, a letter that dates to May, right after the conflict with India. But more importantly, and coming back to our previous episode, the final episode of season 2, it seems that Pakistan is willing to tolerate basically anyone's good relations with India. Pakistan's very close to the UAE, which has strong ties with India. Pakistan is close with Saudi, even signed a mutual defense pact with Saudi, which has close ties with India. And over here is quite rightly emphasizing that good American ties with Pakistan and good American ties with India are not mutually exclusive. The only country, it seems, that Pakistan, or specifically Pakistani policymakers, are incapable of tolerating having good relations with India is Afghanistan. And this comes once again to the discussion of the previous podcast, where we're talking about some of the criticism that we as private Afghan citizens have received for having Indian guests on our independent media outlet, let alone diplomacy or trade relations. And coming back to the topic of religious symbolism and striking terror into the hearts of the polytheists, as Asim Munir preached in his address to the ulama, where does pleading and beseeching the US come into play here when it comes to destabilizing a Muslim neighbor? And with regard to the ayah, I believe it was of obeying Allah, obeying his messenger, and obeying those in authority amongst the Muslims. Not only is Asim Munir somehow incapable of implementing this with regard to Libya, but he's also trying to bring the US to topple an Islamic authority in Afghanistan.
Basically, what they're stating is allying themselves with United States non-Muslims against Muslims, Afghans, and basically asking them, please come join us in waging another war against our Muslim neighbors. And this coming from a government that runs active propaganda campaign, and they have their army of disinformation peddlers saying that Afghans are basically heretics for the fact that they are maintaining friendly relations with India, which is an open enemy of Pakistan. And this is, I think, you don't even have to make an effort. They are repeatedly presenting the world with these contradictions, and this also shows why they're so desperate, because the desperation has reached another height. We have recently found out that Pakistan is not only employing people in Pakistan to do their disinformation and building their narrative. Someone very close to you, Tommy Robinson. Tommy
Yes.
Robinson, the hooligan from Luton, who is best known as a propagandist for Israel, is now posting on social media talking points of Pakistan, and he's quoting DJ JISPR saying that Afghanistan is where all these terrorist groups are, Islamic movement of Uzbekistan, that I think they ceased to exist a long time ago, ETM, so East Turkestan Islamic Party, ISIS-K, Al-Qaeda, who else? Basically, he mentions all the baddies, all the bad guys. And this guy, who is known for the fact that he is an open propagandist for the Israelis, he's now also sharing these talking points. And why would a Muslim country, a nuclear power, need to have people like Tommy Robinson basically parroting their narrative? Why?
I mean, come on, Sangar, where is your husn al-dhan? Maybe Tommy Robinson is just moved by his love for Jinnah's Pakistan and the idea of a Muslim homeland for India, for the Muslims of the subcontinent. But I mean, obviously, a healthy dose of sarcasm.
Listen. Tommy Robinson became famous for the fact that he was claiming that all Pakistanis are basically abusers of underage girls because of the whole grooming case, right?
Yes.
He made a career in media, on social media, by constantly attacking Pakistanis. He is known for his racist rhetoric against Pakistanis for more than a decade. He made documentaries. He even got into a fist fight with Pakistanis. And now he is sharing these talking points. What a strange world we are living in, where now Tommy Robinson is on the same side as these people.
I mean, the thing is, Sangat, I came. I'm gonna keep refer. I mean, to be honest with you, I know this is the first episode of this season, and that was the last episode of that season. But I would, and I'm not sure if we're able to do this or not, but put the link for the previous episode somewhere on this
in the
video.
description, definitely.
Yeah, we'll put it in the description because this is more or less a continuation of that. I mean, it goes back to the point that I said about button mashing. You have the field marshal, chief of defense forces, using Quranic ayat in a very inflammatory way, positing himself as if he is the recipient of these verses to strike terror into the hearts of the disbelievers, of saying that only the rightful Islamic authority, as in me, can wage jihad, and relying on very classical understandings of obedience to religious and political authority. At the same time, we obviously discussed the Christmas thing, but also he's petitioning a non-Muslim power to come and topple the people to whom the Quran refers according to him. So when the Quran says, obey Allah and obey his messenger, alayhi salatu wasalam, and obey those in authority amongst you, and he categorizes himself as being those in authority, well, by definition, the Afghan Taliban are also those in authority. But not only is he expressing a belligerence or hostility toward the Taliban, he's dragging in the United States to do it for him. And the theological implications of this, and we'll get into this slightly, just because I feel like we have to, if you told me right when we started the Afghan Eye that I'd have to give Islam, it's like we're giving when these Daeshi guys would go over and it would be discovered that they've ordered Islam for Dummies on Amazon. So I never in my wildest dreams would have thought that I'm giving an Islam for Dummies class on the Afghan Eye podcast. But here we go. The reason why the concept or the idea of allying with non-Muslims against Muslims is so controversial, and it's so controversial even that if you adopt some of the classical positions that would be held by some of the people in the room with Asim Munir, they would say it's an act of disbelief. And the reason for that is, in Islam, there is the concept of loyalty and disavowal for the sake of Allah, which is your religion should be your primary form of identification. It is more important than blood. And the reason why this is so important is that when the Quran, when the Prophet ﷺ began his prophetic journey, he himself fought against his family, and many of his companions as well fought against their families, sometimes fathers and brothers, on the battlefield. So this concept has a very strong resonance in that your primary form of religious of identification should be based on your religion, to the extent that if you ally with someone who is not of your religion against your brother in religion, you may be in disbelief. Once again, this is not an opinion that I am preaching as a religious scholar. This is an opinion that many of those in the hall with Asim Munir would believe, right?
They are using this same principle to say that Afghanistan shouldn't sell pine nuts and pomegranates to India and have diplomatic relations with them.
Exactly. So this is where the button mashing comes into full force. And by the way, and this is a point that I don't think we can make enough, people in Pakistan are not stupid. People in Pakistan can see everything that is going on. And it is for precisely these reasons that the military has a religious legitimacy crisis that is so deep that it has been for 2 years now seeking a fatwa from Afghanistan to criminalize its own insurgencies.
And you know what this reminds me of is that after the overthrowing of the democratic and legitimate government in Pakistan, when they basically imprisoned Imran Khan, a interim government was formed with Anwar al-Haq Kakar, who was the prime minister. And after that, then there was a election where PTI, Imran Khan's party, won, but still his party didn't get to rule Pakistan again. They installed another government of Pakistan People's Party and Muslim League. And ever since this new government has been formed with its defense minister Khwaja Asif, we have seen repeated threats openly by this government against Afghanistan. This is from 13th of April 2023. Khwaja Asif warns of striking terrorist sanctuaries in Afghanistan. Do you remember when they made these first claims, at least when Khwaja Asif became defense minister?
Sangar, to be honest with you, I remember all of them like it was like they were yesterday, because in our a bit of a shameless self-promo, we do our biannual newsletters, and I've covered all of this repeatedly over the years. I remember it started with one delegation that visited Kabul, a Pakistani delegation, and talks were held. And immediately after the talks, and almost like it was choreographed, a number of Pakistani outlets started to report the same story, which is unnamed sources reveal that members of the Pakistani delegation had threatened Afghanistan that if the TTP issue were not sorted out, that attacks would follow. That was the first sort of real turning point. And since then, it's been consistent. And it's just important to highlight. I remember I got into a back and forth once on Twitter where someone said, oh, well, Khwaja Asif, no one in Pakistan takes him seriously. I don't know why you wrote an article critiquing him. I was like, well, clearly the prime minister and the field marshal do, because he's their defense minister. Well, what do you mean no one takes him seriously? But Khwaja Asif has been, I guess you could say, the public face of this sort of bellicosity toward Afghanistan. But it's important to say here that it's not just Khwaja Asif. I mean, Asim Munir, I believe that he was reported by Armu News that for the safety and security of a single Pakistani, all of Afghanistan could be damned. That was reported by Armu, the Afghan outlet set up by some of these occupation era journalists. Asim Munir also, just in the speech that we covered in our last podcast, gave an ultimatum about you either pick between Pakistan or you pick between the TTP. So the threatening tone has been, I mean, Shahbaz Sharif has also said right after this conflagration in October that the ball is in Afghanistan's court and the TTP issue needs to be sorted out. So all of these messages are extremely threatening. And also at the same time, in a range of international fora, including the UN, Pakistan has repeatedly been regurgitating some of these talking points. The UN one, Sangar, is particularly noteworthy because at face value, you hear the UN Sanctions and Monitoring Committee warns of the fact that there are TTP sanctuaries in Afghanistan and 19 other terrorist organizations.
All right. So this particular report is dated 8th of July 2024.
But over here in the 5th paragraph, it says, further, the Taliban have proven unable or unwilling to manage the threat from the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, whose attacks into Pakistan have intensified. Taliban support to TTP also appears to have increased. So the language here is not a coincidence because it's saying the TTP's attacks into Pakistan have intensified. Not the TTP's attacks in Pakistan into Afghanistan, implying that they're staged from Afghanistan. Taliban support to TTP also appears to have increased. And if you go down further in the report, the word, and I've just done a quick Control F, the word Pashtun features 61 times in a report that is 26 pages. That's more than, well, I mean, it's not just 26 pages because we're also looking at the. So in 21 pages, the word Pashtun is mentioned 61 times. So more or less 3 times per page. And what does it say? The leadership group remains non-inclusive and predominantly Pashtun. See annex. And they have an annex going over the profile of all of these leaders and their ethnicities. The past year has seen the widespread imposition of Taliban policies and ideology, which are more narrowly defined than notions of Pashtun identity. Pashtun dominance is still causing stress within the social fabric of a multi-ethnic country. There are also inevitable tensions between Pashtun Taliban groupings along tribal and political lines. For example, a growing sense that individuals who are close to Hibbatullah in some way regularly achieve preferment over others. Is it now I'm going to ask you a question, Sangar. I want to hear your thoughts. Is it a coincidence that this same growing focus on Pashtuns and ethnic dynamics within Afghanistan has also been seen from recently in DGISPR, which we covered in our last podcast?
Yes, I think this is becoming a very evident way for them to basically portray the government as a ethno-state. This is part of their rhetoric. This is an ethno-state. This is a Pashtun supremacy government. And I honestly, I don't really understand who outside this particular group of people in government in Pakistan actually pays any attention to the ethnic composition of the Taliban, because if the ethnic composition of any country was any reason for wanting to overthrow it, we have quite a number of countries where the government exclusively consists out of one particular ethnic group. For example, the Netherlands, the country where I live, like the government is suspiciously only led by ethnic Dutch. Now you could say, well, this is the Netherlands. Yes, technically it's true, it's the Netherlands, but in the Netherlands they have lots of other ethnic groups. There are many Turks, Moroccans, there are people in the Netherlands.
You have many Flemish, right?
Well, the Flemish, they live on the Belgian side.
Okay.
but they are ethnic.
Yeah.
Uh, the Netherlands, the lowlands, in
Yeah.
general, the Dutch. Most of these people, they speak the same language. Dutch and Flemish is essentially the same. It's like Iranian Farsi and Afghan Farsi. But my point is that just merely having a government that predominantly consists out of one ethnic group is no reason for any country in the world to want to overthrow the government. So I think that the obsession with Pashtuns is singularly a problem of Pakistan, because they have a problem with Pashtuns, with the Baloch, with the Sindhis, and a predominantly Punjabi government where all the power is concentrated in Punjab is seen as unjust in Pakistan. This is why there is so much opposition. So they're projecting their own problems into Afghanistan. Naturally, we do have a lot of resentment and discontent in Afghanistan between different ethnic groups. And the fact that the Taliban are predominantly Pashtun movement is not a secret. However, is that a reason for the UN or any other entity to be concerned with the government of Afghanistan? Mm, I don't really
Well,
see why.
well, let me, as they say, as the kids these days say, put you on. So this is a report that was submitted to the UN Security Council through the Taliban Sanctions Committee. Now, the first question that we've got to ask is who wrote this report? And the report is written by the UN's critical monitoring team. And the critical monitoring team consists of a number of independent experts, the identity of whom is not known. But more crucially, none of these experts are actually based in Afghanistan. And there's no indication either that they travel to or research in or report from Afghanistan. So bear with me, Sangar, okay? Because this is important. A bunch of UN-based independent experts, they submit this to the Taliban's sanction committee, who then submit it to the UN Security Council. Now, the UN Security Council has 5 permanent members and 10 non-permanent members. Do you know which one of those 10 sorry, butchered the question. Which country do you think comes amongst those non-permanent members?
Al-Pakistan, of course.
Pakistan, and it has for 2 years. So Pakistan is the chair of the Taliban Sanctions Committee, and its ambassador transmits that same report to the council, to the UN Security Council, which is then issued as an official UN document. So, is it, I ask you once more, any surprise that much of the rhetoric that we've seen coming out of Pakistan in recent months, bearing in mind this report was written in 2024, in recent months, and DGISPR literally last week, is it any coincidence that the stars are beginning to align?
Yes, and it's very interesting because this brings us back to something that we've mentioned in the beginning of the show, that they in Pakistan repeatedly claim that the TTP is based in Afghanistan, and they keep continuing their attacks on Pakistan, and therefore Afghanistan must take action. But the recent video that I saw of the chief minister of Pakistan Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Sohail Afridi, who is from Imran Khan's party and who has been protesting in the past few days in Karachi and elsewhere, there is a video of him making a very interesting statement. This video, I think, is from Karachi, because he has a Sindhi hat on his head.
ये उस वक्त जुटे थे और ये डील कर चुके थे इनको दोबारा बात करने के लिए हमारा दूसरा जो इन पर इनसे सवाल है कि आप लोगों ने फेंसिंग लगाई, कौम का इतना पैसा बाढ़ पर लगाया, आप लोग उस वक्त ये क्लेम कर रहे थे कि जब हम बाढ़ लगाएंगे तो कोई परिंदा भी पाकिस्तान में पर नहीं मार सकेगा, तो ये दोबारा फिर किस तरह है? ये हमारे सवालात हैं। अगर हम इनकी इनकी पुष्टनाई
So here, Chief Minister of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Suhail Afridi, is asking the Pakistani government that you sold us the idea that we will use the public resources, the money of the Pakistani people, to build a fence along the Durand line, separating people on both sides of the Durand line who are of the. He's not saying that. I'm just adding my own typical Afghan propaganda here. But
Full disclosure.
but he's saying you took the money of the people of Pakistan and you built this expensive fence along the Durand line, and you told us that once we build this fence, not even a single bird will come into Pakistan. Why? Because they said we will build a fence. First, they built a trench, then they built a fence, and all of that was paid for by the Pakistani people. And they said, we will close this fence down and there will be no TTP, no attacks. So now that the fence is built, why are there attacks? So what is Suhail Afridi saying, who is the chief minister of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and he is also an ethnic Pashtun from Pakistan who has won fair and square. He won the election. He is saying essentially what we also continue saying here on the Afghan Eye, is that
I was just
the
about
TTP.
to say, I think Khyber Pakhtunkhwa's first chief minister is secretly an Afghan Eye listener.
No, but see, the point I'm trying to make here is that the TTP is an internal problem of Pakistan. It's not a talking point of Afghanistan. It's not the talking point of Afghan Eye. It's not something that we have invented. It's in the discourse in Pakistan, not just by some random person. This is the chief minister of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. And this is why when you see a report by UN monitoring organization, or you see the defense minister of Pakistan, Khwaja Asif, or Asim Munir, or anyone else making these claims that all the problems of terrorism and militancy that we see in Pakistan, it originates back in Afghanistan, it's just something that doesn't make any sense. But why do they want to continue saying this? Why do they mention this in a letter that they've sent through a lobbyist to Washington, D.C.? Why are they so adamant at trying to convince the whole world that Afghanistan is the center of terrorism and action need to be taken? What's your answer?
Well, in a video that I recently did for the New Arab, it was like an opinion explainer. One question that I asked, and it was before this revelation or this disclosure, was, will Pakistan's military junta continue to problematize Afghanistan as a sacrificial lamb to regain its lost regional relevance? And the answer to that, it seems, is yes. Unfortunately.
And on that note, we are wrapping up this first episode of the Afghan Eye podcast, the first episode of season 3. For our listeners, for our audience, those who have been listening for the past 5 years, I would like to ask you all, please make sure that you subscribe to our channel on YouTube, and make sure that you follow us on Instagram and on X. And if you have any suggestions or any questions, please send them our way via our email address, info@afghaneye.net. And lastly, Ahmed-Waleed Kakar, do you have anything to say?
No, to be honest, it's great to be doing this season, and inshallah ta'ala, to be honest, with this episode, we've been very quick. This this news or this document came out today, and we recorded today, and inshallah ta'ala, we will endeavor to do so for future such developments. Perhaps not on the same day. I think we were pretty blessed today, but inshallah with the others we'll be on it. And please do look out as well, because inshallah we have a whole list of guests who we'd like to host on the podcast, and
Very high profile guests, inshallah.
and whose insights we believe that we would benefit from, and also those that our listeners would as well. So stay tuned, subscribe, tell a friend to tell a friend, and up until next time, if you do enjoy podcasts where we can translate Urdu, Dari, and offer very limited Quranic exegesis as well as Pashto, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.